A lot of people will speak about how there are no original musicals anymore, and this is fairly true. But when they speak about this, they're often speaking about things being based on films or popular properties. But sometimes real life is so wild that those are the stories that need to be turned into musicals and told on stage. These may be verbatim, these may be as close as possible for historical accuracy, or they may take an idea from history and play with it, mold it and shape it. But with so many different types of musicals being based on true stories, this does beg the question we were always going to ask. What is the best musical based on a true story? There's so many, how are we going to decide? Oh wait, we can do this! Welcome back to the Versus Bracket. Yes, I have picked 32 different musicals based on true stories, and today we are going to battle them 1v1 to find my favourite. And please feel free to join in the comments down below. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do game shows and versus brackets, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's dive in to this bracket. Now, I've been wanting to do this bracket for a while. I think after I did the one that was based on films, I was like, okay, we're now opening ourselves up to a whole other kettle of fish here. So, what am I basing this on? Obviously, as always, when we're doing these versus brackets, it's my subjective opinion. I'm just going to go with my gut at the end of the day and see where we end up. But I am trying to keep myself to a couple of pieces of criteria. Number one, I want to pick the better musical on most cases, but as well as that, I also want to think about how they were adapted. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be completely and utterly accurate, but it's how they use that story to tell it on stage. I think both of those pieces of criteria kind of have equal weights here. So there may be a case where I like one musical more than the other, but because it's a strong adaptation or because it has a different shade in the story and how they tell it, it may end up going further. But we have 32 musicals here. I've tried to keep it as much to true stories as possible. There's some here where it's very vaguely based on a true story, like Anastasia. Obviously, that's a musical where the story of the musical didn't happen, but, you know, Princess Anastasia was a real person, so we can kind of see like the true story in there, and it was true that there was a lot of women who pretended to be the Princess Anastasia. And also, the more I looked into it, the more I realised there's quite a few that I haven't seen or don't know well enough to put on this bracket, so we got more and more vague as I ran out. It's like there's some really cool musicals that I wish I knew a little bit more that I could put on here. Maybe we can do a sequel, I don't know. But let's start at the top. We have Everybody's Talking About Jamie, which is vaguely based on a story of a young boy by the same name. And we have Ain't Too Proud, which tells the story of the Temptations, using their music in typical bio-musical fashion. Ooh, okay. So I quite enjoyed Ain't Too Proud. I'm not sure if, obviously, looking at both of these musicals, Ain't Too Proud is more so using the based on a true story lens. I think when we have these bio musicals, we have a couple on this list where they are just legitimately retelling the story of the person. They try to be more truthful. They try to frame it as that. Whereas Jamie is kind of more loosely based on that story. They take a lot of creative license with that adaptation. And honestly, if I'm looking at these two, I do feel like Jamie's approach works stronger for it than Ain't Too Proud's. It's weird to say because these are both going for a very different feeling with that, but I do really enjoy how Jamie approaches that. It takes a lot of the outlines of that story, it takes his name, it takes a lot of the ideas of that, but still gives itself the creative license to fictionalize it and to add in other details. And in the end, you get this really lovely, charming story with the same morals as the real events that happened, but with a stronger pace and a stronger structure on stage. I do think that's where Ain't Too Proud struggles sometimes, is in that pace, it's in the jumping between time periods, trying to tell every single detail about the story, and honestly, its kind of limited focus in times, because Ain't Too Proud, you know, it does kind of focus on its main narrator and feels like some of the other temptations are kind of pushed aside a little bit, despite the fact that I do enjoy that musical and I do enjoy the music and the way that they do end up telling that story. But if you're asking me which one I think is stronger in terms of adaptation, I would say it's Jamie. And see, that's what I mean. It's not always the most accurate. It's not always the most accurate. Next up, people are going to be mad at me. People are going to be mad at me because I know which one I'm picking. We have Ride and The Greatest Showman. P.T. Barnum, as a figure, is an interesting one because there's some arguments to be had that P.T. Barnum was not as good as The Greatest Showman tends to present him as. I mean, honestly, I would probably prefer the other Barnum musical to Greatest Showman because that one's a bit more critical of his approach in things, especially when running a circus and all of that, and the way that he treated the people that he hired. There's a lot of debates on Barnum's character. Obviously, there's a lot of famous quotes attributed to him, like there's a sucker born every minute, which it's hard to say whether that was his actual thought process, but it's a very clean approach to a figure who doesn't have the greatest legacy in history. So where Jamie kind of won points for inaccuracy, I don't think it always serves the person who P.T. Barnum might have been here. You can kind of see what it's going for, and out of context, yes, it does work. But yeah, the more you kind of look into P.T. Barnum as a person, the more you're kind of like, maybe not. I think this is also where I just bring in the fact that I'm not the biggest Greatest Showman fan. I like some of the music. I think some of the music also got massively overplayed. Oh my god, you couldn't step out the door for 5 seconds without hearing This Is Me. Like, it was everywhere. And honestly, I'm very intrigued to see how they expand this on stage. I think I might actually be more favorable of a stage adaptation of this show, but we're judging it on the film, and the film isn't my favorite. It's up against Ride, and if you don't know Ride, oh my god, I love Ride. Ride is so good. I want justice for Ride, because Ride just doesn't really get the love it deserves. There's a great cast album out there. Please go listen to it. And it's all about the story of Annie Londonderry, the first woman to cycle the globe. And it's her telling the story. There's a lot of inaccuracies about her story as well, but the musical kind of incorporates these in, gives us that unreliable narrator at times, and I think it's great. I think a lot of this is just down to my personal preference, as well as some of the reasons I listed about the adaptation of P.T. Barnum's character, but I do think Ride is the one I prefer here. Next up, we have Tina, the Tina Turner musical, versus 42 Balloons. Oh, okay, this is another case of like a musical that I enjoy versus one of my favorites. And I think it's probably going to go to one of my favorites here. I like Tina a lot. Out of a lot of jukebox musicals, Tina's actually one of my favorites, especially with how they tell the story of Tina Turner. I love the pace of that show. I think it actually does a really good job at bringing you through the years and bringing you through that without kind of feeling held back or feeling stuck on using narration a lot of the time. I think it flows really, really well. I think they incorporate Tina's music fantastically into that show. I don't think they shy away from some of the harder moments in her life. I think it's a great depiction of Tina, and I think it's honestly even better for the fact that during the creative process, Tina Turner was very present through the creation of this show. So I don't want to sell it short. The whole vibe of these brackets is that I get to speak about all of these musicals and celebrate them. And then some of us go further and I get to celebrate them even more. And that's what's going to happen with 42 Balloons here. Once again, this is a musical that more people need to know and need to appreciate. It's a wild concept for a musical, and that is undeniable. 42 Balloons probably should not work as well as it does, but oh my god. It's so clever how it structures it, because this whole story seems like it's going to build up to this dream and it's going to happen, and that's everything. But that's not the true story here. And by sticking to that, they have this really interesting structure, a really interesting way to tell this story that builds and builds and builds and then takes a really sudden turn in Act 2. I love that. It's so good. It feels very realistic and so true. To show the good and the bad in a situation like this, I think it is 42 billion for me here. Not only because I love to celebrate new shows on here and shows that, you know, don't always get the love in different places, but also just because I love that adaptation. Despite the fact it was up against a strong competitor there with Tina. Oh boy, Evita, why am I so single? I am thinking. I don't know which way this is going to go. I think I'm just going to speak about both musicals and then see where I end up, because this is interesting. I like Why Am I So Single a lot, right? I really do. I really do. I do think it would probably be stronger as a one-act show, and I do think that I would love to see the show come back and work on itself slowly, but what's there and the actual truth of the storytelling is really, really nice. I like the character journey throughout the show. I like the building of these characters. I think it does kind of touch on similar subject matter in places that could be neatened up and tightened, but yeah, I think for the most part it's quite nice. And obviously it's very inspired by the true lives of Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss as they were creating that show and just their experience of life. I think one massive thing about this is the experience of trans people. The experience of Toby Marlowe as a non-binary person and how they experience life through that is especially relatable to me and something that I really treasure in Why Am I So Single. Evita is a good adaptation. A lot more typical and a lot more of what you would expect when I pitch a versus bracket like this. Bringing you into the life of Ava Perón, giving you a really flawed exploration of her as well. Showing the things that she was good at, but also being critical of her as a figure as well. Like, it's not always black and white in cases, which is why this musical will never be done in Argentina, but it's interesting, it's good. I feel like, personally, when I was speaking through this, I kind of attach more to Why Am I So Single than Evita, which is funny to say because Evita is my favorite Lloyd Webber musical. I will say that to the day I die. I will stand by that opinion. I really do love Evita. It's like Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar for me. Like those two, I treasure, I hold tight, I legitimately think they're great musicals. But I do think a lot of the true story of Why I'm Single relates more to me, which is why I'm kind of leaning that way, but there are more flaws in that adaptation. So this is the kind of push and pull I'm feeling right now. I feel like the right answer here is probably Evita. And I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, so I will give it to Evita here. Next up, oh, you bitch. Fun Home, Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde takes a lot of liberties with that story, but I do think they service the show as a whole. I think it's definitely interesting when you're dealing with figures like Bonnie and Clyde who are their story is more up in the air. They're more legends than anything. And I think it's very interesting to compare the Bonnie and Clyde musical to the film as well, because those both take massively different approaches in how they portray this couple and how they portray that relationship. But I think both actually service these characters very well. I do think if you're asking me which one of these two musicals I prefer, it is Fun Home though. Alison Bechdel's autobiography here is just so wonderfully translated to stage in this musical that just builds and builds and builds, not only telling her story, but also the story of her father, giving you so many interesting parallels between the two. It is probably one of the most beautiful musicals I've ever seen, and I want it to come back so badly. It is gorgeous. Very close fight, and I think it's close enough that I can use my own bias to push one aside and push one up, and I do think I would give it to Fun Home here. Kinky Boots and Sylvia. Kinky Boots based on the factory in Southampton, and Sylvia based on the suffragette movement in the UK. We'll speak about a different suffragette movement, but this is about Sylvia Pankhurst and her mother Emmeline Pankhurst. I think both of these musicals are good. I really enjoy parts of Kinky Boots. I think there's other sections that could be tightened up. I think some of it lyrically is a bit, but I do have a real soft spot for that musical. Like that's one for me, you know? Sometimes you can appreciate a musical's flaws, but still really enjoy it and still appreciate it. I mean, why am I single? I'll criticize parts of that musical, sure, but it's my baby. That's my baby. Heathers is similar as well. Like, I can see the flaws in that material, but I do really enjoy it because it has a special place in my heart. Kinky Boots, very similar to me for that. Sylvia's good and Sylvia's nice. I like the shift of perspective here. I very clearly got some inspiration from Hamilton and other musicals like that as well. But I also think it's a musical that when I last saw it in the last production that they were doing, they were still tooling it and shaping it, and there's still things to cut and mold and shape it. It was like, I feel like when I saw Sylvia, that was a musical that was one step off from being the strongest version of that show. If you can kind of get what I mean from that. It's a musical that now needs to go into the West End after this break and with that time to retool and reshape, and I think it's definitely the pace of Act 1 that held back Sylvia a bit. Whereas I do think, despite Kinky Boots' flaws, that felt like more of a well-shaped show. So I will probably get this to Kinky Boots, but I do really love Sylvia. Bring back Sylvia. Where's the cast album? Y'all promised us a cast album like years ago. Release a cast album and I'll reconsider. If you send me the cast album, I will instead send Sylvia through to next round. There you go. That's my deal. That's my promise. Next up, we have probably the most literal in terms of based on a true story as we can get. Title of show, which is practically verbatim the creation of the musical itself, and we have Tammy Faye. Now, I don't know what they changed for Broadway. I'm not familiar with that version at all. I'm going to speak more about the Almeida version of the show that I saw, which apparently was better critically received, so maybe I won. Title of the show is so good. It's so good. I love Title of the Show so much. I think it's a musical that works a lot better when you have those original actors in it because it's so meta, because it's so open. I have found when I've seen it without those leads, it doesn't always carry the same weight, which is understandable. Like, it's very understandable. But speaking about the quality of the musical, it's so fun, it's so campy, it's such a musical for musical theatre fans. The references are so unbelievably niche, but there's such a charm to that. And then there's Tammy Faye, which I really appreciate what they did with Tammy Faye. They portray that story really well, they show the ups and the downs. It's camp, I love something that's a bit camp. But thinking about both of these, and the pluses and the cons of both, I do enjoy Tammy Faye a lot. I would say I'm a lot more of a fan of the show. And I mean, it would feel wrong if the musical that is literally verbatim what happened, it doesn't go any further. And seeing as I haven't seen a production of London Road yet, this is the only one on this list that is verbatim. So it's got to go to Tyler's show. Finally, for this side of the bracket, we have Six versus Tick Tick Boom. Okay, oh boy, alright. So Six, obviously based on the story of Henry VIII's wives, very, very loosely, because now they're back as a pop band. I said it wasn't always going to be one-to-one. And we have Tick Tick Boom, which is a bit closer as Jonathan Larson's autobiographical musical about his life and turning 30. I mean, in terms of quality, I'm more leaning towards Six. I love Tick Tick Boom. I honestly think moments of Tick Tick Boom are stronger than Rent, and I will stand by that. I like Tick Tick Boom a bit more than I like Rent, and I won't shy away from that opinion. I won't shy away from it. But I really appreciate what they do with Six. I really do appreciate what they do with Six. It's clever in the way that it approaches that, giving each of these queens a moment to shine, the whole structure of the show being based on this contest, the commentary that it has not only on the wives of Henry VIII and how we approach and tell that story, but also how that reflects womanhood as a whole and the way that we compare women and what that says about the very patriarchal society that we live in. Like, the more you kind of dive into Six, the more than there is to appreciate on a textual level here. Tick Tick Boom is very strong as well. I love the exploration of Jonathan Larson's story. I really appreciate the film as well. The film was great. Made so many wonderful choices in adaptation and in expanding it as well. Close race. I'm going to have to go with my gut here, and my gut is saying Six. So 6 goes through to next round. We can flip over to the other side of the bracket where we now have Suffs versus Anastasia. Obviously, I mentioned Anastasia as an example earlier. Now, the events of this musical aren't quite accurate, but there's enough in there that is based on true stories that I will go with it. Obviously, when we're saying it takes a creative license, it's a pretty big one, but still, nonetheless, I feel like it's enough to say, and I was running out of examples and I needed a 30-second one, versus Suffs, which tells the story of the suffragette movement from the American side, where in America, they didn't really like to be called suffragettes. They were the Suffs. I was really hoping that Sylvia and Suffs would be on the same side of the bracket. So I would have a fight between the two of them. That would have been really great. God damn it. I should have rigged it so that happened. That would have been really funny. It's funny to speak about Anastasia here because it is so much more an adaptation of the film than it is an adaptation of the actual story of the Princess Anastasia. So, I mean, if we're looking at accuracy, Suffs is winning the points here. And I also really love Suffs. I love the way they tell that story. I love the character development in that. I love the focus on all of these different women. I love how even within that movement, it explores the mistreatment of, women of color as well. They don't shy away from a lot of those really harsh discussions. And the moments where the legacy of these people, despite the great things that they did, is also a little bit muddied. As well as that, just absolutely fantastic music. Oh my god, Sheena Tal's music in this show is just absolutely gorgeous. Keep marching on. I mean, one of the best music theatre songs written in the past 5 years. Oh my god. If you put on Finish the Fight, I am singing along right here, right now. Love an I Want song, and that's a fantastic one. And I think this is just a case of Anastasia, just kind of narrowly making it onto this list. Well, I don't think the pros of the musical are because of the historical accuracy. There is something to say about the fact that this is more accurate than the film. We don't have Rasputin and the tiny goblin creatures. Don't know what that was all about. He's not a weird wizard thing. He's not here, so I mean, it's a bit more grounded, and I really appreciate that about Anastasia. I just don't think this is the bracket where it's going to do its strongest. With all that said, I do think Suffs goes through to next round. Next up, oh, interesting. Okay, this is a fun pairing that I've got to decide between now, because we have Jesus Christ Superstar and Hamilton. Okay, now, I love Jesus Christ Superstar. As I said, Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar, the two Angelo Rebel musicals that I will defend with my last breath, I love those a lot. And it's very funny because both of these do very interesting things and very similar things with how they tell the story, as the story is told with Judas and Aaron Burr respectively. It's told from the side where history kind of looks more down on them and they're more framed as the villain, There's obviously a lot of Hamilton's approach that was inspired by Jesus Christ Superstar. As Lin-Manuel Miranda has admitted in the past, I'm pretty sure, fact check me on that if I'm wrong, but either way, you can see the parallels between these two. This is a very fitting pairing, and now I've got to pick. I think when we're talking about adaptation, I think both of these do what they need to do. Obviously, there's more that Hamilton could do to criticize some of these figures. There's a lot of discussion to be had about Hamilton and its approach to historical accuracy. Obviously, Hamilton in the musical is very critical of slavery, and yet we don't know how accurate that is historically. But then on the other hand, I think a lot of these changes do actually help the musical as a whole. And it's not like they don't criticize Hamilton. I mean, the entirety of Act 2, Say No to This. It's not like they don't criticize him for the shitty actions that he did, So there's the push and pull there. Jesus Christ Superstar, on the other hand, love the framing of Judas. Love these two worldviews kind of coming into clashing. Obviously, a lot of people who are more religious than me don't love that approach. But I think if we're thinking about this from a historical side, I like the push and pull that you see in Judas. You can see the guilt. You can see the actual logic behind the actions that he does, whether those are right and wrong. This is incredibly difficult. This is incredibly difficult for a first round decision. Honestly, this could be a finale pairing, and I would not be mad. But with that said, I'm going to instead decide this on the quality of the musical, which I do think is a close fight, but my winner there would be Hamilton. I think that's the only thing I can kind of levy up against one or the other to bring one further, so I will go with Hamilton in this case. Catch Me If You Can or Newsies? Okay. Newsies is a very fictionalized version of the Newsboys strike. There's characters in there who are very directly inspired by real people, but a lot of the names are changed, and a lot of the actions are changed as well. But the main event it's set in, and the main actual strike that we follow through the musical is true. Essentially, there's enough in there that is true that it counts. Okay. Versus Catch Me If You Can, which is more and more debatable whether it's true or not, but is directly inspired by the account of Frank Abagnale, who was a swindler and a con artist who dealt with these fake checks and managed to make some money off of that. He has admitted that since writing the book and since the film and the musical were made, that some of these claims were slightly untrue, but for what it's based on and from the accounts that were initially given, it's true from that. I like both of these a lot. Catch Me If You Can is very underrated. I love a jazzy musical. We don't have enough jazzy musicals, and Catch Me If You Can, oh, we love a bit of jazz in there. I think it has absolutely fantastic songs. Goodbye, fantastic. Fly, Fly Away. Oh, tears every time. Even like the lesser known songs like Jet Set, Pinstripes Are All They Can See. Oh, absolutely slaps. There's a lot in there I enjoy. Newsies, on the other hand, I could say very similar things. I've seen many a production where they do great things. I mean, Santa Fe, fantastic every single time. All the choreography and the dancing and everything, it's so good. I want to show you this, that they're very evenly matched on quality for me. I would say very similar things about both shows. I enjoy them for different reasons. I have nitpicks in both. When we then come to the other question of how they adapt the history, I may actually lean more towards Newsies here. While it is more inaccurate, I think the way that they take a lot of the ideas of that story and mold them and shape them into the ways that they need to are very strong. I like how it deals with Catherine's story. I like how it links her back to Pulitzer. I like his presence in this show as well. I love all these characters. I love the people that we meet, and a lot of these people do feel like they would be the type of people to be in that kind of fight. I think just on a structural level, Newsies works a bit stronger than Catch Me If You Can, which is hard to say because these are very different musicals trying to do very different things. But Catch Me If You Can has a few pacing issues here and there. It's a lot of jumping around, and these kind of like road trip style musicals where it jumps from location to location do sometimes struggle a little bit more. So with that, these are very well paired musicals, but I would give this to Newsies. Next up, we have another very autobiographical musical, the only other one in here other than Title of Show, because I forgot when I was speaking about Title of Show that I also put this one on here. Whoops. We have My Son's a Queer, But What Can You Do? Versus The Little Big Things, based on the story of His Name Has Left My Mind. What is his name? Henry Fraser. That's his name. Love both of these musicals. Love both of these musicals. Obviously, from a personal perspective, My Son's a Queer means more to me as someone who comes from, you know, a queer background. I'm trans. I am fruity. I associate myself with the term queer. I love the term queer because that feels like it captures everything. It feels like it captures my gender. It feels like it captures my sexuality. I am queer. I love that for me. That's me. Hello. And just the way that Rob and Madge tells her own story is so wonderfully charming. Rob just has this way of just completely bringing you onto their side. Having the actual clips from their childhood embedded into the musical as well works fantastically. Oh, it's a hard one to beat, but let's see if Little Big Things can get one up. I really enjoy Little Big Things. I enjoy how it tells its story. I enjoy how the approach is trying to be more respectful of disabled people as well. We know historically disabled stories can sometimes become all about inspiring people and being the strongest and feeling like every single story about disabled people have to be them overcoming every single challenge, and you have to be literally the best person ever to have your story told as a disabled person. Essentially taking this story and showing it to able-bodied people and going, look how good this is, clap. And I feel like Little Big Things does a good job at balancing that and not falling into that trap where some other shows have done. I think it tells Henry Fraser's story really well. I love the ups and the downs. I love the parallel of pre-accident and post-accident. I think it's a very charming musical. Both very, very strong, but I do feel like my personal attachment to My Sons Are Queer is what's going to send that through to next round. Next up, okay, two musicals where I'm slightly critical of some of the adaptation, actually, so this is going to be interesting. We have Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson and Just for One Day. My criticism with Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson is that I feel like if it was made post-Hamilton, it would probably have been stronger. It is very critical of Andrew Jackson, as it should be. Oh my god, he was not... there's a lot to criticize with that man. Oh, Jesus Christ. But I think some of it is of its era and hasn't aged amazingly well, especially if we're looking back on it. I think it frames it a bit too much on the figure of Andrew Jackson and underplays some of the more horrific things he did and the way that he treated the Native Americans. I honestly feel like there is a world where we could see a version of Andrew Jackson come back and maybe be more framed like Hamilton did, telling that story then with people now. Maybe there's a way to put more of a focus onto the hurt that he did. But I think musically, Andrew Jackson is amazing. I think like it's a very like punk rocky musical, and just like I want more jazz musicals, I want more punk rocky musicals. But yeah, on the whole, like I'm a bit more critical with the adaptation just because over time we've kind of seen the cracks in it. And there's definitely ways that they could tighten it up if this show ever has any future life. Just for One Day is in a weird position because I saw it at the Old Vic and it is about to come back. Literally yesterday, the show that is currently at the Shaftesbury just closed. Like I'm going to go to London next and we're probably going to see the marquee up for Just One Day. So there is a new production coming back where they've likely made changes. So in the future, I may be more positive on this show. But I do think this is a hard one, and actually very similar reasons for Andrew Jackson why I don't love parts of it, because I feel like it focuses a lot on the Live Aid side and kind of forgets or kind of undermines the reasons behind Live Aid at points. Obviously, since Live Aid happened, we've heard certain criticisms about it, which the musical does touch on a little bit, and Geldof in the musical does say that, and does say it's not going to fix the world, and it's not going to fix everything. So there's moments of that, but there's probably a bit more that they could do. But when we look at what the musical is trying to do more than what it maybe could do, I do think it's successful in that. It tells the story of Live Aid, it recaptures that feeling of being there, it explores the nostalgia for it and why it was such a big event in a very comfortable way style. So at the end of the day, looking at both of these ones, I am more critical of. I do think Just for One Day is a bit stronger for me. Next up, we have Gypsy and Joseph, ATATDC, as I've had to shorten it on the brackets, but that is Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I always forget Gypsy is based on a true story, which probably doesn't bode well for it on this bracket, but if you're asking me, I like it a hell of a lot more than I like Joseph. I think Joseph is kind of boring. Don't put your pitchforks down. Pitchforks down. Pitchforks down. Pitchforks down. Musically, it does have some great moments. Okay. You can put it. Pitchfork away. Pitchfork away. Pitchfork away. Thank you. Okay. Musically, I do think it has its moments. Close Every Door to me is brilliant. Go 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 Joseph is so upbeat and camp and fun and yay. But I think it's very clearly a show written to be performed by children. And that's not a crime. Come on, we need theatre that, like, kids can do, like primary school kids can do. We need theatre that's accessible to them. And I'm never going to yell at it for being that. It is what it is. But yeah, I don't think it's the strongest when it comes to adaptation. It serves its purpose. That's what I'll say. Joseph serves its purpose. It's not one of my favourites. I'll watch it and enjoy it. Like, I did it as a kid, and it was nice to do, but I wasn't enthralled by it. So it does kind of feel like Gypsy's gonna win here by default, because I love that musical a lot more than I do love Joseph. That adaptation is really strong. I love the characters there. I love especially like the centering of Mama Rose as well. The flaws in that character and the ups and downs of the relationship with her kids is so interesting to watch. I feel like it's a great adaptation, and I would give it to Gypsy here. We're almost there. Fisherman's Friends versus MJ. This is a bracket where MJ is going to struggle more because the book is my problem with MJ. I think musically it's great. Michael Jackson's music sounds incredible, as it always does and as it always has. I will give the book one piece of credit where I think it is very clever with where it places itself, so it doesn't have to deal with some of the more criticized parts of Jackson's legacy. but I think that's very evident, and I think it's very easy to see through. And I do think that telling a bio-musical story of Michael Jackson is very different to do now than it would have been years ago. But even beyond that side of things, I don't think the book is amazingly well-paced. I think its strengths come from the music, come from the choreography, come from the staging, which sadly is less of what I'm judging here. So kind of by default, it's going to go to the other musical here, which is Fisherman's Friends, a musical that I really, really enjoyed. It's so charming, it has very Come From Away vibes, and that's one of my favourite shows, you know? I can't fault that. I think you definitely fall in love with the characters there. I love the ups and downs in that. Is it perfect? No, but it's cute, it's fun, it's a feel-good musical, and sometimes you need that. I'll give this one to Fisherman's Friends. Okay! The final one for this round, Come From Away versus Operation Mincemeat. I'll see you guys later. You guys can pick this one. I'll see you guys later. Yeah, cool. Bye. See ya. Listen. Look. Listen. Okay. I really like the way that Operation Mincemeat adapts that story. Obviously, it's a wild story, and this is a show that should be going further, but it's up against Come From Away, and I'm sorry, that is my favorite musical of all time, and I'm sorry, Operation Mincemeat. I'm sorry, you got handed literally the worst competitor to go against in the first round. Literally the worst show that you probably could have gone up against in this bracket, first round. I love the way Come From Away adapts that story. It tells the story of this town that is flooded with new people, and it's very clever in the way that it mixes and matches these stories, pushes characters together to be able to tell all of these different stories from those few days in Canada. When the world has faced this absolute ginormous tragedy, it's these people who step up and come together to show the best of humanity in the face of the worst. And I think it is so successful in telling that. It is so strong. There's no way it can't go through to the next round. So while I love Operation Mincemeat so much, I really do. This is Come From Away's fight to win. Now that I've given you an overview of every single musical, I can fight through these next rounds a little bit more quickly, speed run through to find my winner. Jamie versus Ride. Ooh, it's close. It's a close fight because I do really like both of these, both British musicals. Let's go. I would personally say my preference here is Ride. I think when I'm looking at both of these stories as a whole, I think Ride brings you through that story a little bit stronger. And I'm more interested in like the history of Ride and that perspective rather than looking at Jamie as a true story, if you get what I mean. Jamie kind of works on its own. If you didn't tell me Jamie was based on a true story, I probably wouldn't guess it. I don't know if that's a fair way to pick, but we have to be kind of cutthroat in these rounds. 42 Balloons, Evita. Evita beats a musical that I really love in the first round, so it feels like a musical that I really love should beat Evita in the second round. But Evita is really strong. Evita is so strong, and I can't undersell it, but I do really like 42 Balloons as well. And I think the structure of that is so strong. You know what? I think 42 Balloons can win here on its own merit. 42 Balloons next round. Fun Home, Kinky Boots. I think Fun Home wins this hands down for me. I really do like Kinky Boots. I have a real soft spot for Kinky Boots, but I think when I'm looking at this in telling that story, similar reasons to Jamie, actually. You could tell me that Kinky Boots is not based on a true story and I probably believe you, whereas Fun Home feels a bit more real in that aspect. Yes, I'm going to give it to Fun Home. Title of the show in 6. Oh, are we going to go verbatim or are we going to go for taking a fun glance on a historical story? Ooh, I think when I'm looking at that and I'm looking at quality, I think I'm going to go with a fun look on history. I think I'm going to go 6 for this one. I love Title of the Show so much, but I'm going to go 6 for this. Suffs and Hamilton, very similar approach, but I do think Hamilton is stronger. I do think Hamilton is stronger book-wise as well, and like the quality of that music in that story. Yeah, I'll go with Hamilton. Tough, because I love Suffs, and I would love to see Suffs go further, but yeah, I'm going to go with that. Newsies, My Sons Are Queer. I think my bias here is probably leaning more towards My Sons Are Queer. I also do think because that's more accurate in places and because you can see a real human touch to it, I feel like it's more fitting to go a bit further here. Yeah, I'll give it to My Sons Are Queer. Just for One Day in Gypsy. Ooh. I like Gypsy more, But when I'm thinking about it based on a true story, I do think Just for One Day might actually take this, and that feels wrong. But I said at the top of the video, I may push through some shows that I like less than others. Yeah, you know what? Just for One Day, I feel like that should go through to the next round. Oh, this feels wrong. This does feel wrong. But you know what? I've said it now. I've said it now. It's going through. This is what happens. I make snap decisions. I'll regret them later. I don't have time to regret them now. I can regret them later. And then when you moan at me in the comments, I will be like, yeah, you know, I actually agree. But I have to make these decisions very quickly for this video. Let's move on to the next round. Fisherman's Friends, Come From Away. That's a very fitting pairing. Both of these shows feel like they mirror each other in many, many different ways. Both feature fish very prominently. Both about small communities coming together, but hands down Come From Away. Hands down Come From Away. Love Fisherman's Friends though. If you haven't listened to Fisherman's Friends, they released a cast album like a while back. I'd love for that show to come back. Go on another UK tour, please, Fisherman's Friends. Now that Come From Away has wrapped up its tour, I feel like Fisherman's Friends can come back. Come on, let's do it. All right, round 3. Ride versus 42 Balloons. Ow, my heart. Ouch, my heart. Owie, wowie, my heart. If I thought picking between Operation Mincemeat and Come From Away was hard, this is worse. I love Ride. I love 42 Balloons. I think if I'm looking at quality, I would say I prefer 42 Balloons. If I'm looking at how they adapt that story, you know what? I feel like I'm leaning 42 Balloons as well. I'm really glad Ride got this far. I was scared Ride was going to be a first round out, but it's fought valiantly. And honestly, I would give someone to 42 Balloons. Let's go 42 Balloons, but please go listen to Ride. Fantastic show. Fun Home and 6. Okay. I feel like I'm leaning Fun Home. Is that weird to say? I love how 6 tackles telling those stories. I like how it does the songs which kind of lean more accurate, and then it has the kind of interjections later. I like how it twists that history. I like how it uses the true stories to tell a moral and to tell a message, but Fun Home is so beautifully crafted. So interesting. Honestly, at times feels more like a play with music because of how real that story feels. I'm going to go Fun Home. Here. Fun Home, let's go. Other side, Hamilton, My Sons Are Queer. This is not fair. These are 2 shows doing very different things, and it feels weird to compare them. But this is my job, and that's what I must do. I do feel like this one should probably go to Hamilton. I would say that, you know, My Sons Are Queer, the true story there affects me more. Oh, okay, maybe that's the angle. Oh, maybe that's the angle. Is that the angle? Is that the thing that we take to send My Sons Are Queer through to the semi-finals? Because yes, Hamilton is based on a true story. It does very good at telling that story. It makes you relate to these people who lived hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But on a personal level, My Sons Are Queer means a lot to me as someone who lives through a queer experience. That true story is told incredibly well, incredibly heart-provoking, and means a lot more because it's told directly from Rob Madge themselves. But if we're looking at quality, I do feel like Hamilton is one of the best crafted musicals of the past, decade. While I'd love to send My Sons Are Queer through here, I feel like it's probably more correct to send Hamilton through. And I have to make snap decisions, and I feel like that's the snap decision I'm going to make here. Yeah, Hamilton can go through to semi-final. Just for One Day and Come From Away. They rhyme, and look, are you surprised? I do feel like Come From Away is the winner here. I like how these pairings on this little section of the bracket have been really thematic. You know, Fisherman's Friends and Come From Away feel like they have a lot of links. Just One Day and Come From Away have a lot of links in the way that they tell the story, have a kind of ensemble cast, different people's perspectives, all telling their stories of their experience of one day. All 3 of these musicals kind of reflect each other in very interesting ways. Both of these feel like different British answers to a Come From Away style of story. But yeah, I would say it's Come From Away here. All right, semi-finals. We're almost there. Let's find our winner. 42 Balloons and Fun Home. While I love 42 Balloons, while I think that is a gorgeous musical, I do think it is one-upped by Fun Home here. Fun Home is so heart-provoking, so incredibly well crafted. I think the autobiography side of that probably helps it in this bracket a lot more as well as just being a really strong musical on its own right. I love 42 Balloons so much. I love it incredibly. It's a musical that is still working on itself as well, just like some of these other ones that we've spoken about. So maybe in the future, it will tighten itself up even more. I can't wait to see it return to the UK. Please don't leave us forever. The Americans can't have all the fun with this musical. We must have it back at some point soon. But I would go with Fun Home here into the final. And the other side, Hamilton and Come From Away, both incredibly strong. But when it comes to telling a true story, I do feel like Come From Away is stronger. The way that they tell that, the way that they craft it, having 12 people multi-rolling, this town comes to life with such a small selection of characters. I do feel like this has Come From Away. Okay, we have our finale pairing all lined up. But before we get there, let's find out which show is our third place. We have 42 Balloons versus Hamilton. Honestly, very, very happily surprised with this top four. It's a lot more musicals that, like, I cherish a lot. Musicals that are a bit more underrated. Musicals that are fairly underrated that I get to celebrate. And now we get a musical that I feel like is underrated versus one of the heavy hitters. I think it's undeniable that Hamilton's adaptation is really, really strong. There's elements that have been criticized, but I do think the things they change do help that musical if they aren't entirely accurate. Then there's 42 Balloons, where I feel like the way that it tells that story and structures it is really, really interesting, really, really intriguing, and gives you a very different perspective. I think we're speaking about true stories here. I do think my third place winner is probably 42 Balloons. I love that show a lot. I love that musical a lot. I think we're speaking about just the quality of the shows. Maybe the conversation would be a bit different, but when we're speaking about telling a true story on stage, I would say 42 Balloons is my third place winner. But now we've got to find first place. So let me know in the comments, out of these two, who's your winner? Or let me know which show didn't make it to the finale that you wish could have made it a bit further. My favorite comments on these videos are always the ones where you play along, because it's always so subjective. People have different opinions. A lot of this bracket was kind of very close and just narrowly had one over the other just because of personal preference. So I'm expecting that to be the same for a lot of you guys as well. But now our finale, Fun Home, Come From Away. And I feel like you know what's going to win here. I feel like you know what's going to win. I love Fun Home. I will shout my love for Fun Home with my full chest, and I'm so glad that it's got here. But I feel like, hands down, it's Come From Away. Hands down, it's Come From Away. It has had a breeze to the finale to take this crown, as it rightfully deserves. The structure of that musical, the way they tell that story, the clever way that they push people's stories together to be able to properly give you the perspective of this entire town. In a show that's only 100 minutes long, you find so many different stories, and they all feel so developed and interesting, and narratively, it just all comes together with this tight little bow. It's phenomenal. Come From Away is my winner. So there you have it. What do you think of this bracket? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and let me know any ideas for future brackets you also have. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, helps out the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. I also have other social links and a merch store in the description down below. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.